We are going to, right, call this special meeting of our Board of Education to order at 5:31 on this Tuesday, September 10th, 2024, with a roll call, please.
Yes. Dr. Michael Thomas,
Present.
Lauren Dowden,
Present.
David Shepherd,
Present.
Rachel Merrickwin,
Absent with notice.
Denise Jones, yes. Michael Watt Miller,
Absent with sickness.
Colleen Clemzak,
Present.
and we have a quorum.
Yes, we do. Great. If we could stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. If we could peruse this lengthy agenda, and if I could have the first motion to approve the lengthy agenda in front of us.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Excellent. And a second, please.
Second, approve it.
And a roll call.
Dr. Michael Thomas,
Yes.
David Shepherd,
Yes.
Lauren Dowden,
Yes.
Denise Jones, yes. Colleen Clemzak.
Yes.
Motion passed.
Excellent. Okay. Sonia, do we happen to have any public comments this evening? Okay. But even with Michael not here, I still feel compelled to read my words because it is a public meeting, darn it. So, per Board of Education Policy 2230, a few reminders specifically about logistics of public comments portion of every meeting, including this evening, as is posted on our agenda publicly for every meeting to respect all of our stakeholders, our commenters, our board, our public. We adhere very closely to the 3-minute limit for comments for everyone. We will set a timer and we would expect everyone to respect their 3 minutes. In addition, we do not respond to public comments at board meetings, but we do hear them. We respect, we listen to, and we take into account all community member concerns. If there's a specific question that comes up that we can respond to after the meeting, we will do so in a timely manner. Staff reports.
Yes, great.
Okay, thank you.
So tonight we have several presentations, and I'm going to first provide us some history regarding our finance and facilities. So Dan, if you could switch to the next page. So as a reminder to all board members, during the fiscal year 21-22, we received a working cash bond to complete district-wide facility updates. Some of the projects that we initiated with that bond issuance was modernizing southeast and northeast cosmetic upgrades, upgrading Central Middle School bathrooms, and installing our new HVAC system at Northeast. We also owed a payment to our Aero Special Education facilities at that time, to which end we did complete. So at this time, we've extended and we've used that initial balance of that bond. We're good. So there's no funding remaining at this time.
Okay.
So during fiscal 23 and 24, if we recall, the district began community engagement, and that was really to address our overall district facilities needs. We conducted student sessions, staff parent engagement sessions, and surveys from our community. We compiled that information and presented to the Board of Education at our June meeting. And then the Board of Education requested a variety of options to be presented to the board in response to that community engagement, specifically to address space and then also our short-term facilities related needs. Just so you're aware, everything tonight is informational only, and you will not be taking any action regarding what they're presenting, and you're gonna have a lot of different options that you can look through. However, we do have specific recommendations for short-term bonding options that we'll be exploring as soon as next week, just so we can be very preventative and upfront in terms of financing. So the goals of tonight's presentation from the finance side is to review short-term working cash borrowing options in order to maximize the district's debt service extension options, and Tammy will present on that. And we'll also review our long-term borrowing options to address the district's educational environment, spacing, and our aging facilities needs. The goals of our presentation from our facilities aspect is to review and recommend short-term facilities projects, and that is 0 to 5 year scale, along with a 5 to 10 year recommendation. To review our life safety items with associated and estimated costs. We will not go into specific detail with that, but they do have rough estimates assigned to what those costs would look like by building. And then review options to address district educational environment spacing and aging facilities. That would be specifically the space factor. Contributing factors, as there's always things that impact our decision making. So as you are all aware, Evergreen Park is landlocked, thus requiring the district and our lovely hired experts to really think creatively regarding space. The mobile units are currently 23 years of age, and the Regional Office of Education is requesting action associated with the discontinuation of the mobile units. With action, I should preference that it doesn't necessarily mean we have to act tomorrow. It means we need to plan to say, how do we attend to address our mobiles? The cost associated with facilities work, just so you're also aware, is only increasing in price due to inflation and current state of the economy. And it's the district administration's recommendation that we consider bonding options, which we will talk through extensively tonight for facilities projects, as opposed to using our fund balance reserves. And there's a couple of different reasons as to why, but mainly you are currently at a steady rate to which your fund balance is at your recommended board policy. And additionally, we want to keep that fund in reserve in the event of a rainy day, so that you have it in the event you need it for an emergency. And then due to the costs associated with facilities upgrades and updates, the district will not be able to then conduct any major facilities projects without considering bonding options, which is why we have these two experts here together to really explore what they could look like. So I'm here all night to answer any questions that you have, but I am gonna turn it over and we're gonna start with Tammy. And I'm gonna welcome her up. She is the expert in the field to really assist us. She's assisted us prior and is really gonna demonstrate all of our different options to extend to our community.
Thank you for that nice introduction. I know there's some familiar faces when I was here last time, maybe a couple new faces, so I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. And we have, as Dr. Woodland mentioned, worked as the district's municipal advisor for a few years, and we helped you with your last bond issue, which we'll touch base on a little bit as we go through some brief history. So my job tonight, as Dr. Woodland said, is to educate you, to talk to you about the ways that you can borrow both sort of on a short-term basis or a non-referendum basis versus thinking longer term potentially as well. So we're just gonna get right into the presentation, and please chime in as you have questions. Just kind of from a starting point on this slide too is an overview of how school districts can legally borrow money for capital projects. So they have the authority under the school code to issue, we call general obligation bonds. General obligation means that you have the full faith and credit of your tax base behind you, meaning you have the ability to extend property taxes and collect those from taxpayers. And there are two categories of GO bonds, as we call it for short. One would be the traditional school building or referendum bonds, so going directly to the voters and asking for permission to issue bonds. You also have ways to sell non-referendum bonds where you're collecting property taxes to make bond payments for various projects, which we'll talk more about in greater detail in a minute. There are ways that school districts can issue debt and pay it back from operating sources and not pay it back from a separate property tax levy. Those are things like alternate revenue bonds or debt release certificates, but you as a district would need to feel very comfortable that you have the room within your operating budget to pay those obligations, because that means you're not paying teacher salaries, for example. You're taking that money away for a different purpose. So we're not gonna talk about those mechanisms tonight. We're gonna talk about your GO bond options. So let's go to the next slide and first talk about how you can issue non-referendum GO bonds. And for those of you that were on the board when we sold bonds a few years ago, you may remember this concept of your debt service extension base. So just as a quick reminder, this goes back to about 30 years ago of legislation that was approved by the General Assembly and Governor at that time. And they basically said, if you are tax capped, which of course you are, being in Cook County, whatever amount of non-referendum principal and interest or debt service you had in levy year 1994, that forever established your debt service extension base, or your DSEB for short. So that means that at that time, they said you could issue non-referendum bonds as long as, at that point, the maximum maturity on the bonds couldn't be more than 20 years, and your maximum payment couldn't be more than that levy year amount from 1994. So at the bottom there, you can see your original DSEB was about $1,154,000. So you could have in 1994 sold bonds, non-referendum, up to 20 years with an annual payment of $1,154,000. Now, there was another law that was enacted 15 years ago that enabled you ever since and going forward to increase your DSEB annually by the CPI, or 5%, whichever's less. That now, because of that compounding increases of the CPI over the last 15 years, you can see that your DSEB is now about 1.63 million. It's increased the borrowing power of the district over time, okay? All right, so if we go to the next slide, these are the types of non-referendum bonds that you may issue that are subject to your DSEB. So you have the most recent experience issue working cash bonds. That's what you did last time when you sold bonds. So under the law, you can issue working cash bonds, you put the bond proceeds into the working cash fund, and then you by resolution as a board, transfer the dollars to the capital projects fund by way of the O&M fund so that you can actually spend them on capital projects. There is a maximum amount of working cash bonds that you can issue. We'll talk about that in a minute, but there is a limit. So it's not this just number, you sell whatever you want. First of all, you have to make sure your annual debt payments are gonna fall within the DSEB, but then just at a basic level, there's a limit on how much working cash bond you can issue in the first place, and I'll show you that formula for you in a second. I'm not gonna get into great detail at all on funding bonds or tort bonds today, really because tort bonds are not applicable to capital projects. But funding bonds are a mechanism if, let's say, for example, you didn't have any room in your working cash formula, which sometimes happens to school districts, you can go through a two-step financing process that still enables you to do capital projects via your DSEB. But I'm not gonna get into all that detail tonight because it doesn't apply to you. You have the ability to sell more working cash bonds. You may recall, those of you that were on the board last time you sold bonds on a working cash basis, you had to have a public hearing. It's called a Bond Issue Notification Act hearing, and it functions much like the hearing you have for your tax levy or your budget every year. Just have to give the public the opportunity to provide oral or written testimony about the bond sale. The other requirement listed at the bottom is a 30-day petition period. So you'll see in a timeline I'm gonna show you later that one of the very first acts as a board you would take to issue working cash bonds is to adopt a resolution of intent. And within a couple days after the board meeting at which you do that, a notice goes in the newspaper informing the public of your intent. And it starts a 30-day clock. So if during that 30 days, at least 10% of the registered voters within your district sign and submit a petition to you as a board, they can legally stop the sale of the bonds. They can stop that process. So that's a lot of signatures, and it's a rare occurrence, but it is just part of the legal process that you need to know about. Okay. Now, I'm gonna update you on a couple changes in law that are just about 3 months old, thanks to the governor's signature in early June. So prior to June, if you as a school district were issuing referendum bonds, non-referendum bonds, or those debt certificates that I mentioned, the maximum length of maturity was 20 years. It's now 30 years. So this is helpful to school districts for maybe sort of an obvious reason. You can spread that burden of the debt over a longer period of time. But as I'll show you later, there's a trade-off. So if you're gonna pay it off over a longer period of time, it's gonna cost you more. Your annual payment will be smaller, but it will cost you more. But one of really the main reason that the governor ultimately signed this and it was approved by the General Assembly is because school districts in many cases were wanting 30 years. So they would go to the General Assembly with a request for approval for special legislation. So now they're saying, you don't have to worry about asking for that anymore. We're just gonna let everybody do it, okay? The second one, which is really, really helpful to a lot of school districts in the state, is voter approved bonds starting with the November election. If you pass a referendum, whatever that dollar amount of the bonds is that you're gonna sell, they do not count against your statutory debt limit. That is a really, really significant change. I'm gonna show you what yours is in a minute, and what you'll see is that that detail ultimately could be very helpful to your district. Similar to the first bullet point, school districts could always go to the General Assembly and ask for permission to issue bonds in an amount approved at referendum above their statutory debt limit, but it was just another part of the process and it stretched things out. So now you don't have to worry about asking for it anymore. You can just do it if you pass a referendum on and after this November, okay? And then the last one is interesting. It's really trying to make things more of a level playing field between school districts that are capped and not capped in the state of Illinois. So if you're not capped, you've been able to sell what we call life safety bonds, which means your architect has to submit a survey and amendments to the Illinois State Board of Education and get approval on certain projects so they could get that life safety designation. They've been able to do that without any limit on what the annual debt service payment is. But if you've been tax capped up until June 7th, life safety bonds were another type of DSEB bond. So you would be limited within that DSEB I showed you. So now you can issue life safety bonds as long as that final maturity is not more than 30 years. If you get the approvals from the state, those annual debt service payments can be whatever you want. They do not count against your DSEB. Okay, so and again, that's what non-capped districts have always been able to do. So it's trying to make it more fair, equitable between capped and non-capped districts. Okay, all right. So let's start looking at your existing debt that you have. So the blue bars represent the non-referendum debt service payments that you have as a district. And you only have non-referendum debt in terms of bonds. You do not have any outstanding referendum bonds. The red lines, there are two of them there. The red solid line represents what your DSEB is as of right now. So that roughly $1,633,000 number we saw. That dotted red line is showing you how it will grow at a pace of 1.5% per year. So very likely conservative assumption, but you can see that trajectory and how your borrowing power as a district would continue to grow over time. So what I want to highlight here is, again, some of you that were on the board last time, remember this. We structured the bonds from 2021 purposely with a drop-off in levy year 2024. So basically giving you the flexibility to be able to sell more bonds, layer in more debt without having to potentially restructure anything. Like if we brought everything up as high as we could and now you said, Tammy, we need to use our DSEB now in 2024, I would be here saying, okay, but now we're gonna have to restructure some of what you did in 21 and it's gonna be more expensive that way. This gives you the drop off, it makes it more economical, okay? So that was a very purposeful decision by the board back in 2021. And the next slide just shows you the numbers that support the bar graph, okay? So that green shaded column is showing you that you have the ability, again, to sell more non-referendum bonds as long as in each year, the annual payment's not more than any of those numbers in that green column. So for example, if you sell some non-referendum bonds later this fall, in levy year 24, which is the first payment you can have because we're gonna be in levy year 24, that payment in the first year can't be more than $540,979. That's what that means. And then you can see subsequently what it looks like. Okay, so you have significant room in your DSEB to be able to sell bonds and finance some capital projects. Okay, all right, so let's move on to looking at some financing scenarios. First thing I want to show you is your current debt capacity formula. So this takes into account your equalized assessed value, or your EAV. We multiply it times 6.9%, and then we subtract the amount of existing principal that you have on bonds at this time. When we do that, we get that number shaded in light green. It's about 34.1 million. So if you were gonna sell working cash bonds, life safety bonds, debt certificates, any amount that you sell is going to count against that $34 million figure. But because of the law change in June, if you were to put a question on the ballot at some point in the future for referendum bonds, whatever that amount is, does not count against your DSEB, okay? That is helpful to you in and of itself because you would still preserve the other types of bonding capacity that you have for the future, okay? And potentially, your referendum amount could be more than 34 million. right? So you don't have to worry about that. It is outside that statutory formula. And this number, this 34.1 million, just so you know too, it's not a static number, it changes over time. So as your EAV grows and as you pay down more principal on bonds every year, that debt capacity will continue to grow over time. Okay? The next slide is showing you the working cash bonding capacity I mentioned a few minutes ago. This is your formula that is unique to you, and it takes into account again your EAV, it factors in your maximum tax rate in the education fund per this formula, it factors in corporate personal property replacement taxes and the amount of evidence-based funding that you get. We put all that together in the formula, subtract the amount of existing working cash bonds that you have, and you can see that your number is just under $15 million, a pretty sizable figure. That's the maximum amount of working cash bonds you could issue against your DSEP. Okay. All right. So before I show you some scenarios, I did want to talk a little bit about the interest rate market. So there's a couple different things going on in this graph. The gray shaded area is showing you what the Fed has been doing with short-term interest rates, and this just goes back about 4.5 years. The different colored lines represent different points on the yield curve for what's called the Municipal Market Data Index, or the MMD short. It's like the Dow Jones Industrial of the tax-exempt municipal bond market, and that's the type of bonds that you as a school district sell. So we can see obviously what the story is, and we are all, I know, pretty well aware of the story with the Fed for the last several years. You know, rates were very, very low until we got into early to mid 2022, and then the Fed started raising short-term interest rates, right? That stair-stepped approach, until they really flattened out about a year ago or so. And the Fed has been talking at different points, different messages over the last several months about when it may lower short-term interest rates and by how much they will do it. So the different colored lines, again, representing the MMD or that index, and again, that's important to us because when you sell bonds, your bonds are gonna sell at a spread to or relative to what the index is doing, so we follow it every single day in our office. So we see what the Fed was doing in 23 into 24, kind of stair-stepped up and then flat, but look at what the bond market has been doing, right? Sort of up and down and up and down. Why is that? Couple different reasons, but some of the up and down, particularly in 23, was because the bond market was hopeful that what the Fed was doing to get inflation under control was working. So for example, one week it was really expensive, I remember maybe 18 months ago, to buy a carton of eggs, crazy ridiculous expensive. And then that finally came down. So the bond market, the rates would come a little bit down. But then it was still expensive to rent an apartment or put gas in your car. So the market would say, no, I don't think the Fed has got this quite right yet, so rates might go back up a little bit. So that's what we've been dealing with. It has definitely been more stable. In fact, it's been improving quite a bit over the last few months. That is because it's not only when the Fed talks and the bond market's listening, that is important, but we are also very closely watching the jobs reports that are coming out, right? And the CPI reports that are coming out as well. And of course, the Fed is listening to that too, but the bond market is taking cues more, quite frankly, from some of that right now than the Fed meetings that are happening. And when there is another Fed meeting next week, there'll be another one in November and another one in December. The November one is right after the election, and people are asking me a lot right now, so what happens with interest rates after the election? And the best answer I can give you is, it depends, which probably doesn't surprise you. So we do historically see interest rates go up in the bond market after a presidential election, no matter who's elected. It just depends on what level of volatility there might be. We'll see what happens. But what you should know sitting in your chairs is that where interest rates are now in the tax-exempt bond market, you're actually just a little bit below what the historical averages have been for over the last 20 years. So you're not in an environment where you took advantage in 21 of selling your bonds at historical lows, but you're not at the highest point. You are pretty spot on where that historical average has been. And my hope would be that if you decide to move forward with selling some non-referendum bonds here in the next few months, that we may see some benefit for you in terms of lower interest rates, because the Fed is talking about lowering short-term interest rates next week, and we'll see what happens over the course of the next few months. Okay, all right, so these numbers are crazy small, so I know you have your book, so I'm just gonna highlight the important details here. And know that there is a summary page coming. We ran 3 scenarios. The common element between the 3 scenarios is the sale of $6 million of working cash bonds later this fall to address some of your capital project needs. And it's the second of the 2 columns that are shaded in light blue. The estimated structure there, where the payments are and how much they are, between these 3 scenarios, it doesn't change, it's the same. What is then for each scenario is a hypothetical $85 million referendum bond issue in 2026. In this example, it has a 20-year maturity. So what I'm really trying to show you is we're thinking about this as a puzzle. So with the 2024 bonds, we're taking full advantage of that DSEB availability for a couple of years, but then we're leaving room so that if you go to referendum in 26, whatever increase you need for that fits within the puzzle. And we get, if you wanna flip to slide 13 for just a second, this is another bar graph. So it's showing you those new green bars are the non-referendum portion, and the newer blue bars on top of that are the referendum portion. But you'll see that everything is flat, or steady, I should say, right? So that's how we're trying to think about this. So if you go back to the prior slide, what I wanted to also show you is on the right-hand side, that column. So from a $6 million working cash bond issue in 2024, the first line that's shaded in light green under levy year 24 is $65. That is the estimated impact on a homeowner with a $250,000 market value home. Then you can see 2 years later, a hypothetical $85 million referendum in 2026, that amount for a taxpayer of a $250,000 home is about $720 with a 20-year payback. Does everybody follow that? Okay. Let's go to slide 14. Again, very similar. The difference here, instead of having a 20-year payback on an $85 million referendum, it's a 25-year payback. So annual payments are less each year, so that homeowner impact goes from about $720 to about $630. But if we compare the total debt service cost, for the 20-year, it's about $135.4 million. Here, it's about $153.2 million. And then similarly on slide 16, this is looking at that same $85 million idea paid back over 30 years. So now, our estimated impact on that same taxpayer is $575, but the cost to borrow that $85 million has now gone up to over $172 million. So this is where you can't have it both ways, right? Because if you're gonna pay it back over a longer term, it's gonna cost you more, but that initial impact would be less. And the summary chart is on slide 18 if you wanna kind of look at some of the information in one place. But we really wanted to show you these options today just to give you some reassurance that whatever you decide to do potentially for a referendum in the future, we can put it into the puzzle, and it doesn't impact what you do now if you're gonna sell $6 million of non-referendum bonds again. Okay? Everybody follow that? Okay. All right, a couple more things. I'm gonna show you a timeline in a second here for the non-referendum bond option. But one of the things that will be a newer concept for you compared to when you sold bonds last time is a reimbursement resolution, which is on slide 19. So you may very well start actually writing checks on some of these projects you need to do rather quickly. But what you're gonna see in a minute is by the time you would get your working cash bond proceeds would be December. So what the IRS says is, okay, school district, if you need to start working on your projects before you get those bond proceeds because there's certain legal steps you have to go through, you can write checks between now and then, as long as you as a board have adopted a reimbursement resolution. So if you would do that at your upcoming board meeting later this month, there's a 60-day look-back provision on anything related to actual construction costs. And it's for checks that you write, not whether you incur the cost, it's if you write the checks for it. So if you adopt it next week, right, 60-day look back is to late July. So starting late July up until you get your bond proceeds in December, any checks you'll cut related to these projects, you'd be able to pay yourself back with bond proceeds in December. So you, as long as you adopt this resolution, you can do that. And you actually can look back a little without limit for expenditures, again, checks that you write for professional service fees like architect's costs, as long as they're related to the projects you're doing. Because obviously, a lot of times that work starts well in advance of when you're actually doing the construction. Okay, so that is something that we recommend you do. There's no downside to doing it. It just gives you the flexibility to be able to pay yourself back. Okay. And so the last thing I wanted to address for you tonight is a timetable for the working cash bonds for this fall on slide 21. So there would be 3 resolutions at your board meeting coming up next week. The first one, the resolution of intent, I mentioned earlier, that starts that 30-day petition process. The second one is a resolution to call that public hearing I talked about. And then the third one would be the reimbursement resolution that we just talked about. We can have all of those ready for that board meeting next week. Then, again, a few days after that board meeting, we get the necessary legal notices in the paper for both the hearing and that 30-day petition period. Your October board meeting, you'll hold the public hearing. And then in November, we would have you approve, I missed one step for the October meeting. We're also going to do a request for proposals process to select an underwriter, which would actually sell the bonds for the district. You went through this process last time and we brought you a recommendation.
Right.
So we would manage that process for you and we'd bring you a recommendation in October, just like we did last time. So then your 30-day petition period would end in late October and you'd adopt a resolution for the sale of the working cash bonds themselves at your November meeting. That resolution is called a parameters resolution, and like it sounds, it provides certain parameters. So for example, the maximum amount of bonds the board is authorizing is $6 million. This is the maximum interest rate that we accept. This is the maximum annual debt service payment, all those things that you would expect. Because we want to delegate the approval to some delegates on behalf of the board to sell the bonds. We don't want to be tied to a board meeting date to sell the bonds and go into and get your approval that night. Because with all the dynamics happening in the market every day, it's in your best interest to be flexible about that. So what you can see is we're suggesting that the sale would happen right after the Thanksgiving holiday, the first week of December. We think that that may very well be a good time to be in the market. I mentioned earlier that often we see interest rates go up right away after a presidential election. They do tend to calm down by that first week of December. So it works out well that we have to take care of those legal steps anyway. We can't do it really any faster, but it's somewhat fortuitous that that's the timing that we think the market may calm down if there's some volatility after the election. Okay, and then you'd have your bond proceeds before winter break and be good to reimburse yourself and continue to spending on the projects. All right, I know that's a lot of information to throw at you in one setting, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I'm gonna go first, cause it's a real easy question. With all of these numbers thrown at us, I'm sure with the community, reviewing this process with us, they'll look at the page 12, the $65 and the $721 for taxes. Will that be every year
That's what
or?
Yeah, it's a one-time increase, so then your bill would go up $65 and you'd continue to pay that $65 increase. It's not, it doesn't go up every year, it goes up and then it stays there,
Okay.
right? So you'd have that initial increase of $65 this year, and then in this example, you'd have another $721 increase in a couple years. That brings your payments up here as a taxpayer, and it stays like this.
If we choose.
I'm just saying,
Yeah, so like
can you
there's
explain
the
more?
one we're looking at today is just the 65, which
Yeah.
is our typical. And then in a couple years, if we choose for the 85 million,
Yeah.
then it will impact. And we had the 20, 25-year and 30-year scenarios.
Yeah.
So,
Just wanted to kind of
yes,
explain that a little bit more because I'm thinking
Yes.
that will be,
Yeah.
that people will look at that number and see their tax bill kind of going up and may have some questions.
Sure.
as they should.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think the one thing that, again, if you, as you mentioned, if you decide to move ahead with the working cash bonds, the one thing that you can tell a resident is the $65 would be what's for sure happening at this point. Anything else is still hypothetical. We're just planning for that possibility.
Absolutely.
You and I were the only ones.
Oh,
Right,
It's only
the first time, no, like 3 years, like,
Oh, yeah.
we have new, you guys haven't been through this,
No.
right? So please ask everything you need to know. I was like, oh, Michael and Ray, like, it's just you and me,
Yeah.
cause this is, it's a lot.
Well, what I think is super important though, when Eric and I have been consistently meeting with Tammy, is that, again, regardless of the hypothetical scenario, what our intent is that we're setting you up as a district for long-term financial planning. So whatever decisions we make today, it may or may not matter what we make in the future. We wanna ensure that we're doing it in a stable way so that you have opportunities, regardless of what they look like in the future. But we could still address facilities needs today.
We're wrapping up the projects that we started in 2021. You have to spend the money within a certain amount of time. And looking at the plan that we had then, it was 6.3, is that what we,
Yes, it was.
okay. So, and it would be 6 again, right, is what we're, and we've, I liked that you listed all of the things at the very beginning of, oh yeah, this is what we've done with what we were interested 3 years ago.
Yep.
And we have a similar punch list
Mhm.
now.
Yep.
That would
you'll see
also,
tonight too.
right, that would help every student, every building. But it is, we've done this recently, and we did a good job, right? So there's that part of it too, so it would be doing again what we just did. But it is, again, it's a lot, so please, if you guys have questions,
No, I mean, I think it makes
or
sense.
if you're just reeling.
No, it makes sense, I mean, like, you're maximizing your buying power. I
Mhm.
mean, and it's one of those where I think everybody needs to maximize the returns that they can get. I mean, if there's dollars out there that we can utilize for projects or for, kids, so kids have a better learning experience, like, take advantage of those dollars,
Two questions. The 6 million with the $65 increase, that's based annually, right?
It's a one-time
It's
increase.
a one-time increase?
Yes.
Okay,
Mhm.
all right.
Yep.
So that's easy to get along. The 85 million is just a number we're estimating, right?
Correct,
Right.
Just throwing out there, okay?
Yeah.
Because that number could be lowered if necessary.
correct.
Which way?
And I'm sorry to interrupt you if you still have one
No, you're
question. I
good.
should have mentioned, with that $65 increase, it may sort of jump out the page for all of you, but we're looking at a tax rate increase from the working cash bond, it's under 4 cents.
Mhm.
So that's how I'm getting to the $65, but it's about 4-cent tax rate increase on the tax bill.
So depending on the home value, of course,
Right.
that would change that $65.
Exactly, we used 250 because it felt like a relatively easy number to, as a benchmark, but, I'm sorry, did you have another question?
Yeah.
No.
Okay.
I was just seeing the impact monthly.
Got your tax bill out?
Yeah.
I mean, we are taxpayers too, and I want people to ask questions, they should, I mean,
Yeah, absolutely.
that's how it works. We wanna be responsible with what we've been entrusted, so. Definitely.
Any other questions for Tammy? So I do wanna go back before, she of course has another board meeting, she's a very, very busy lady. So I do wanna go back to slide 21, just so I can talk briefly with Tammy still here about our recommendations for the next board meeting, which is next week.
Yeah.
So essentially, our goal is to say, what could we do sooner rather than later? To cross off those low end but bigger picture items that we know our community, our students, our staff said are high needs for us to address. With doing that, summer construction is already vastly approaching us. I know it's only September.
No, it is.
But like summer construction is on my mind, Jim's mind, Eric's
Yes.
mind, and especially those three lovely architects' mind. And so we need to plan for that appropriately so. That includes us going out to bid for items, making sure that we're, informing contractors, things of that nature. So that is why we need that reimbursement resolution that Tammy spoke about. And so it would be my recommendation to really move forward with those 3 items, 1, 2, and 3 at our September 18th meeting to give us the ability to start thinking forward as to what those summer construction items could look like. So I wanted to give you time to answer any questions about what would be on the agenda, if you need her to explain that any further in between either now or next Wednesday. If you have any questions for Tammy on that, she can answer that now. On what those mean. Public hearing, 30-day petition, and the payback. The ability for us to pay back anything that we need to.
Okay, and that would set us up for the 6-month window,
This.
the 6-month window
Of
to do the
July to
reimbursement.
December that she
Correct.
mentioned.
Yes,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
alright. So that'll give you the ability to get pricing, get everything done, start, ordering equipment, because we know it takes forever to get delivered and all that stuff,
And
And-
back pay.
and back pay,
So
okay.
if we get the funding in December, because there's a process to doing that, that's all these legal requirements, that we can back pay anything that we've
Okay.
started.
That makes sense logically. And this is for the $6 million working cash.
Correct.
We're not going any further.
No further.
No further today, no further today.
Not taking any action
Nope,
today.
we
No,
just
not
talked
today.
about it,
Yes.
okay, alright.
But so resolution, that would just be items on to approve our resolution on the agenda items. Approve the resolution of intent, approve the resolution for the hearing at the next meeting, and then approve that reimbursement resolution, David, that you were mentioning too.
All right.
Thanks
Thank you so
everybody.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if we have other questions that occur to us as we sleep and wake up in
between
the
now
middle
and
of the
next
night,
week,
and,
of course.
yes, it's going to happen,
Yes.
and it should, we can always reach back out and ask more questions via email, so we all have that information, so, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, so now for the really fun part. So
I won't be offended by that.
I was like, wait, how do you feel about that?
I know, but Eric, I know Tammy well. But Eric knows that he loves Tammy because it's all the money, but I love, what can we do for our learning environment for
There you go, that's what I
kids,
do.
The money,
right?
so it works together, thank you so much for coming.
We all love
I know, I love a good spreadsheet, don't get me wrong, and it was color coded,
Yeah,
I mean, like,
Color coded,
it tells a story.
it's nicely bound. You can't go wrong.
No, it was great.
But ultimately, DLA has really put together any single option under the sun that they could think about that would really address, again, short-term facilities needs and long-term facilities needs. And we're gonna go through all of those options tonight, and again, we're not making any decisions, and in fact, it will most likely be my recommendation that we go out to the community again and we ask for their feedback. So we will walk through each of them, but we want you to further understand what that looks like, and I'm gonna turn it over to them.
Alright, excellent. Good evening, everyone. Good to see all of you. Not nearly as many spreadsheets, but hopefully thought-provoking today.
Pictures.
We've been pretty busy over the past few months since the last time we met, looking at all of these different options and potential opportunities. Some of the things we're gonna talk about today could be independent of one another. Some things are meant to kind of work together, but some of these things we could shuffle around, so just a lot to think about and certainly stop us and ask. We're gonna go in kind of reverse order from what Dr. Woodland said, so we're gonna start with the larger spatial needs. Then we're gonna go into the kind of high impact short-term needs, and then those sort of 5 to 10 year things. So with that, I'm gonna first introduce Heather Jewell. She's our lead designer for the district. She's been working really hard on this and can really speak eloquently to these options. So she's gonna go through that, and then Peter's gonna talk about the other options.
Alright, I promise there's color and it's way more fun. Alright, so I'm gonna go through, because there's a lot going on with these different options, so we came up with this summary to kind of explain a little bit beforehand what you're gonna see plans of. So all of the options address kind of what were highlighted in the whole master planning process. What were things that just need to be addressed at all the schools? So that's the trailers that we already heard about, finding a place for art and music within, the elementary schools, central, the undersized cafeteria, the accessibility issues, and just the general congestedness of central. So all of these do address those options, they just do it in different ways. So option one is leaving central, it's just additions and renovations at central. So it's going to involve, and we have a diagram showing you a little more exactly what's gonna happen, but it's gonna involve a couple different addition options there. It's gonna address the cafeteria, music space, some of the spaces that are missing, like STEM and STEAM labs, a little bit of additional classroom space, accessibility, and then just the circulation of that facility. The option 1A is gonna be paired with, that addition option, that's paired with what we're calling elementary option A, so that's additions in each elementary school to give you that art and music. Option 1B is that addition at Central plus a new early learning center that will pull the pre-K and K out of each elementary school, and then the space that is left over when those are pulled out becomes that art and music and additional space. Option 1C is the addition at Central plus an additional 5th grade addition, so that's pulling each, all the 5th grade classrooms out of each elementary, and then that space gets dedicated to the art, music, and additional space. Option 2 is a new middle school. So we did a study for that puts that on the existing middle school site, just in that, blacktop space. That would be a new 3-story school. That kind of follows along with the elementary option. So option 2A is the new middle school plus additions at each elementary school. Option 2B is that new middle school plus a new early learning center that, and then renovations at each elementary school. Option 2C is the new middle school, and then a later 5th grade addition, which doesn't fit without removing the old middle school, so it's a second
Okay,
phase.
second one.
And then renovations at each elementary school. So that's what you're going to see, and just so you kind of know what you're looking at.
And Jim and Eric and I have looked at all of them at length, so if you have like intricate questions, if we don't know the answers, we can follow up with you. But please ask as many questions about each of the drawings as she goes through them.
Yeah, some of them are a little bit complicated to understand what's going on, so we created this demo plan of Central Middle School so you can kind of understand what the concept is. As was mentioned earlier, it's pretty landlocked, and so we kind of have to make use with the space we have, which is, some of the space that's currently occupied by some of the buildings. So there's some area that had been a couple additions that are only 1 or 2 stories. What we're proposing, that's where the cafeteria is, the kitchen, music and art. We're proposing that be torn down and then a new 3-story addition go in its place. So that will, allow us to have a little more working area, allow us to, do some more things. So if you move on to the next slide.
And one caveat I would add about that is, obviously, if we take the cafeteria
I
down,
was gonna say, how are we gonna feed our students?
food service becomes a challenge.
And that's all
uh,
5 buildings,
Yeah.
so that cafeteria feeds all 5 buildings.
Right, so that is a particular
I
challenge
I
to
know
that.
they know that, but like, that was where my head went, I'm like, ooh, how we feeding people? Oh, okay.
And we've done similar things with other districts, we're doing something like this at Lyons Township right now, at their high school, where they're basically moving lunch into the gym, and that's where they have lunch, and then they clear out and have gym in there. It's a challenge for sure, and then they're bringing in food from the outside. There are ways to do it, but that'd be a heavy consideration in looking at this is how do we navigate that piece,
Yeah, definitely.
but it is doable.
We should mention each one of these options has pros and cons,
The
so.
reason for the 3-story limit, just a quick question.
The 3-story,
Limit,
just,
like, it's just, where we just basing it off?
it's based on the things that we're putting back in, that's about how many stories we think we need to do what we're doing here. We might be able to go higher, I haven't looked at the zoning for that, but at this point, we didn't see a reason to take it any further.
Okay, gotcha, thanks.
Do you have where we'll replace this demolition?
We do,
Yes.
yes, it's
Oh,
it's
okay.
further on,
Yeah.
just helping to understand the piece that's getting replaced, this is what you see here is the first floor.
So it's
moving-
it's essentially the basement of Central, that's what she's talking about right now, the bottom level that will
Okay.
really be addressing.
It's not really much classroom space, so that doesn't get impacted, it's the food service, obviously.
Yeah, and I think here you can see the music.
Oh, that's all in that wing.
Yes,
Right next
or
to
band and
Band and
piece
art
of-
are right
of-
across the, yeah.
Yeah.
Music, I mean, band is upstairs, so choir and music and art are impacted by that down there.
Alright, move on to the site plan here. This kind of shows both, you know, the option 1A and 1C, so off to the left is a new 3-story addition, that would be where those 5th grade classrooms would be added with that option. And then the 3-story addition up to the north is, you know, the size footprint of what the future addition would be. Moving on to the next one, this is
One question. Can, with Central Middle School, can we please consider parking?
In the option 2, that does get addressed a lot easier. We'll talk about that. Here we can probably make a few adjustments, but we're still kind of limited because we're still working on that sort of sprawling building footprint.
And I would say probably a con of this option is I think we had planned to address the parking, which is in the space to the right, that kind of blacktop space that unfortunately is student space right now. So it does, you know, it's you know, would need to be used for parking some of it. So what you see here is the first floor, walking in, we're proposing some renovation to kind of open up the entry lobby. We put the media center in the middle, anywhere that you see that open to below, you're looking down into a space. So that's that cafeteria piece. We're adding, it's hard to point it out, but we're adding an elevator and a stair that will help you, you know, get to every level, or actually 2 stairs. You know, the circulation was a big thing that kept coming up, so providing more ways for students to get up and down. You know, there's kind of a circular hallway configuration there that you can see on the north and south of that media center, so that allows students to have more than one way to get through the building, which they don't have now. And you can see art, you know, additional classroom space, additional, you know, space for small groups or for, you know, teacher use and things like that is included as well. Additional toilet rooms as well. And then, yeah, moving on to, this is the lower level, so this is actually the main floor of that cafeteria. We're showing a stage, we're showing the band, music room there, new kitchen, which could be made to be more efficient, you know, to serve your food service needs. Additional classroom spaces. This would feel, one of the big benefits of this is this would have a lot of glass on that north side, so right now the students don't have any light
Light,
into their
no, they
cafeteria
really don't,
space.
yeah.
And so this would use that cafeteria as kind of a light well, so that would bring a lot of light and a lot of openness into the heart of the school. So it would dramatically affect the feel of the school. And then that 5th grade classroom addition off to the left kind of solves some of the circulation issues. There were some classrooms now that you can't get to unless you go through other classrooms or you go downstairs. And so those are very difficult, challenging classrooms, and so this would solve that issue with that addition. And the next one is the third floor, so that connects into the top level of your building now. That 5th grade addition is 3 floors. And that adds, you know, additional classroom space, STEM, STEAM space, which you don't exactly have now, so we would have that space as well.
And again, just to be clear, because there's a lot of things happening here, we're showing multiple options here together. Should you say we don't want to move 5th grade needs to stay that whole section there on the left, that just doesn't get built, you just do the addition on the north, and then we're looking at potentially doing additions at the elementaries or maybe looking at a new pre-K center.
Alright, Alright, so the next one's option 2, which is the new middle school. And you kind of see the space that it takes up on the site. It's kind of wrapping around the existing school, because so the idea would be to be able to keep the existing school operational while it's being built. It certainly would involve still some interruption and things like that, but it can still be built during operation. That area in yellow, that would all come down. That would be, parking, it would be student drop off, student physical education area, maybe some green space, which I know you don't have a lot of now. We definitely want to bring that back.
When you just look at the footprint, your current building takes up like 3/4 of the site. And by kind of stacking this and building more efficiently, you're getting like 2/3 of that now to use for those things.
And can address parking, can address drop-up, pickup, can address circulation, can address space at all elementary buildings.
I won't go through this in every single detail, but just to point out a few things. So we do have that cafeteria kind of in the central, so we still have that opportunity to have that open light, two-story space that, creates kind of a sense of openness in the middle of the school. This gives you more classrooms than you have now, so, we haven't done a full programming exercise to know exactly what all those want to be, but it gives you just space, room to grow, appropriately sized spaces, so appropriately sized science labs, appropriately sized, cafeterias we talked about, some additional larger media center, additional student small group spaces and things like that you don't have now. And still keeps the same functions that you have, the fitness center and things like that you have.
One additional feature of the new building versus the renovation of the existing, the code requires that you have to have a storm shelter when you do a new building, or if you increase your existing building by over 50%, so the addition wouldn't have done that. In this one, that red area would also double as a storm shelter, which there's some perceive that as a benefit. It's a little more money to build that, but it does provide that protection to your students.
And it's required.
And it's required.
Alright, moving on to second floor, we've got media center looking down into that cafeteria space. We've got plenty of circulation space and stairs. The area in dark green and north, those are the science labs. We've got those stacked on a couple different floors. You see those small group spaces are available on each floor as well. And then the third floor, just more classroom spaces. That fifth floor, very similar, that's stacking up 3 stories, that optional, additional addition if that's what you do with the elementary school.
I have a very strange question. What's the rationale of having stairwells against the very outside corners of the buildings?
So for exiting purposes, you need at least a certain number of them to exit directly outside because they're your fire exits.
Okay.
So they don't necessarily have to be in the outside corner, but we often do that because a lot of times they have glass in them. And so it allows.
It's nicer, and that's, because we've got the classrooms, like the 5th grade classrooms, they all have external walls too, and the internal hallway overlooking the gym. But it was just something like, for a safety's sake for our students, I'm sure there was a reason, I just needed to know what it was, because to me, it would be more logical to have.
It's one of those interesting things when we're looking at fire code
Yeah.
versus safety needs.
Oh,
They
of course, I knew
often-
there was a reason, I just didn't know what it
They often
was.
conflict with one another,
I
where
got you.
fire code wants you to have exits that get you out of the building
Of
that are at the
course.
end of the building.
Yeah.
And then when you're thinking safety and security, it's always the reverse, you wanna kind of tighten it
Yeah.
up. And so you're kind of wrestling with it. The fire code we have to follow, that's a requirement.
Okay.
The safeties, things are more district specific, and we can look at ways to incorporate those internally, but that's generally why you have them pushed out to the outside.
So the next ones are the elementary school. Does anyone have any questions about the middle school options that you just saw?
And we can come back to those two.
And I'll summarize all the options at the end. I officially have a cheat sheet now, so I can
To A, to B,
yeah,
to C.
understand them.
Got you.
I'm kinda looking at the direction of this and almost similar to what Colleen was saying in regards to the stairwells, but it just seemed like it should be reversed. Like which, I'm just curious, I know this, we just talking out loud, but what street, like what's
This is 95th against all the
95th 's on the
green,
left.
95th foot on
95th is
on the
Yeah.
left hand side.
On the left hand side.
where the classrooms are? And so the,
West is at the top and east is at the bottom.
and the, let me go back.
I would stress this by
I
no
wouldn't
means
stress it,
is a
right?
final design
It's
of
not
anything,
final.
it's
Yeah,
a
so
space planning exercise,
Just
but
say,
it-
just think Denise is just, you know,
Yeah.
thinking about the direction, that's it.
And I think ultimately too, one of our main questions that we had for DLA was, can you build on the property that we have
Right.
because we're landlocked?
Right.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, what they're saying is, you know, we could go back to the drawing board, but we have the option to do so within the space that we have within the property that we own,
Buy something
Yeah.
new.
Right,
without
right.
us having to purchase land.
Oh, yeah, that.
one of the nice things, you know, about this, at least when we think about it, you have 95th, which is obviously a big,
Mhm.
busy street. We're talking about outdoor play, circulation, all these other things.
It's on the
We're
other
moving it
side,
towards the
yeah.
inside, kind of protecting it from
Yeah.
that.
Same with drop off too,
Yeah.
as I was thinking, like, if the entrance was on 95th, it would be a nightmare.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
You would have all more circulation on this side,
Cause on
which
the
is-
backside, you can
right.
drop off, kinda like, I mean, we take Zoe to CCD at Redeemer, that's what they do, they have the little alley, like right by the school, so you're dropping off 95th and you can just cut through the parking lot,
Yeah, absolutely.
which I think does make the traffic flow easier.
Mhm.
But I mean, I think to that point, the idea of like the school kind of like blocking, I mean, you know, anyone from coming on or off of
Yeah.
95th Street.
Yeah.
I think is kind of a nice,
Yeah.
like, you know, I mean, I don't know, I mean, I don't think we've had any issues, but I feel like the busier the street, the more something weird could happen.
We don't have kids running
Your back is-
around on the parking lot,
Mhm.
right next to the fence, right next to 95th.
Or somebody who
Like,
walks in
now
this
we have
busy street that
something
people
more
are walking, you know, someone could
substantial.
say something.
Yeah, I'm just
substantial.
picturing it, but now that you all mentioned something, mentioning it in regards to the high school,
Mm-hmm,
it is set up
mm-hmm.
kind of some similar
Like everything's
to that.
happening.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Good. I'm just trying to,
Of
Yeah,
course.
visualize
Yeah,
it, I know. Thank you.
Alright. So the middle school, each color is one of those options we talked about, so blue is option A, that's the addition. Option B is yellow, so that's the pre-K space that's pulled out. And then the orange is option C, so those are the fifth grade rooms. And we did this more as a space exercise. The specific rooms, especially the fifth grade rooms, we just picked some rooms just for a square footage purpose. It doesn't have to be those specific rooms.
wait a minute, is that a trailer still there? I'm just kidding.
It's a really nice tree with a picnic table under it where the staff eats lunch right now. So they don't want it to go all the way away, but it's where the garden is, so you know. Oh no, it's gotta go. You know it's gotta go. It's gotta go. Got to go.
So that's kind of what it looks like here on Southwest, that kind of space planning exercise. We also, I think all of the elementary schools except one, they mentioned in kind of that visioning master planning that they don't have playgrounds. So they don't have like soft surface
Yeah.
play space. So we kind of showed just a footprint to show you like what that looks like, you know, the size can change a little bit or whatever, but just, you know, we know that was something that was important, so we see that as being something to highlight. So these are the options at Southwest, Southeast.
If you wanna go back to that, I guess just to highlight that the additions, while you have very tight landlocked sites, they can fit, they just become even tighter and more landlocked. But they could be scaled back, we are adding some additional spaces based on the feedback that we heard, you know, some flex rooms and breakout spaces and those sorts of things, in addition to art and music, so.
Mhm.
Parks, so nice. parking, I hear you, I heard you.
Yeah, and I think one
And
thing I
drop
should
off.
say about the elementary sites is we know there were issues with circulation, things like that. We haven't addressed those yet, but we did hear that that was an issue. At Southeast, you know, just the options we studied, some of these had a couple different places that an addition could go. We tried to, as much as possible, get music and art kind of near the middle, near, you know, the performance area. So that kind of drove some of the logic.
Look at all those new plans.
Northwest, this was, as you probably know, this was the most challenging one.
Right, yeah, there's,
We're not
I mean,
able to
they've got
add
a
as-
playground, but it's the village versus the, yeah.
We were not able to add as much, so that's a very tight little addition there. It still
Loving the
works,
blue
but
spot, loving the blue.
yeah.
Yeah, that'd be nice, right? That'd be really nice. And that is where the mobiles,
That's where the moles are.
that's where the mobiles are now, so.
So at Northeast here, you know, this is one of the spaces we identified. I know the area to the north, also, it's my understanding, belongs to the school. So, there's some additional opportunities to use that in some way. So the option, B, if you go to the next slide, that studies where a new early learning center could go. We saw that we know that the buildings and grounds building would have to be relocated, but we saw that there was actually space, you know.
How did
if you're
Jim feel
willing
about
to-
that?
Make a bigger one.
We could fit an early learning center there.
Yeah, that is our largest piece of,
Yeah.
like, property, yeah.
You do own also the property next to Southwest.
Wow, baseball
The
field?
baseball fields?
I didn't know that. Who plays there?
We do.
Oh, you do.
It's very highly
So-
utilized by our community.
Yeah, those fields are.
It is, I'm really surprised, I didn't realize that the district owned that. You said we, but like, we don't,
District.
yeah, yeah. I don't know.
You do not own the property on Northwest.
No, that is like I said, that is village,
Correct.
that's park.
We haven't explored the property on Southwest, as we've said, because it is something that the community currently uses significantly, so. Just making sure you're aware.
That's northeast with the early, got it.
Skip the next one, we pulled it off of this slide, we just didn't pull it out of your packet. Okay. Well, now we'll talk the dollars associated with all these things.
Yeah, and can I with you, Ed, summarize them, cause I wanna make sure that I'm right too.
Yes.
So I have my cheat sheet pulled up. So 1A, I really want us to think about this in terms of how all the options that they're gonna present address space. Okay, cause that is ultimately our goal, is to address space. So he's gonna go into specifics, but 1A is Central Middle School and our elementary schools would each have construction. Okay, so then you can talk about specifics.
So a couple things to note. The options A and C in both 1 and 2, they're effectively the same cost. So when we look at doing additions spread out around all the buildings versus doing additions with a 5th grade addition at the middle school, those two work out to pretty much the same cost, and I'll talk about what those numbers are, and it's just when you're doing small little additions at a bunch of buildings, while they may be larger in size total, they end up being less efficient to build, they cost a little bit more money. When we're doing these larger additions at the middle school, we're going vertical as opposed to out, that can be a little bit less money, so that there's some trade-off there that allows that option, if it's attractive to you, to be roughly the same cost as doing small little additions. The option B in both scenarios is the most expensive. That's because we're looking at a new early learning center in one and then 2 new buildings in option 2. And it costs more to build new buildings. We have to bring site utilities over, we have to do detention. A lot of things go into that, so that's what that looks like. And then between 1 and 2, ultimately it looks, option 2 works out to be around double the cost of 1, just that's kind of how the math worked out, but I'll walk through these a little bit more detail. So in option 1A, just that basic addition piece on the north side of Central, we're looking at between 26 and 28 million. Again, these are conservative numbers, they're order of magnitude numbers, you know, once you guys kind of felt like you may wanna move in a direction, we would tighten that up and get something a little closer, but it gives you an idea. When we're looking at the additions at the elementary schools, we're at 13 to 15 million, so that's the same in option 2 as well. So that 1A option, we're looking at between $39 and $43 million to do all of that work. The 1B, again, that central addition on the north, that cost doesn't change from option 1. A new early learning center, based on the size that we're looking at here, is about 25 to 27 million. And then renovating the interior pre-K rooms, we're looking at 2 to 3 million. We're saying about the same for renovating the interior 5th grade rooms too, when we look at that. It's a couple classrooms. That number could be a little bit less if it, you know, depending on what we do with those rooms. You know, if it's an art room, we're bringing in new sinks, those sorts of things, there's a little more cost to that. If it's, you know, it's just some ceilings and flooring and paint, it may be less, but, you know, effectively we're talking about 8 classrooms in total, whether it's pre-K or 5th grade. So that total project there would be between 53 and 58 million. As we move into the 1C option, the larger additions at the middle school, so including 5th grade, we're at 38 to 41 million. And again, that 2 to 3 million for the renovation, so we're at that 40 to 44 million, give or take.
Okay, so 1C is making the changes and also adding that 5th grade
Correct.
addition. So we regain space instead of pre-K and early learning, we regain it from every other building
From the
with the
5th grade
5th grade.
rooms.
Okay,
That is correct.
I got you.
So then as we move into 2A, this is now the new middle school option. So A and B are the new middle school without 5th grade. So looking at a new middle school, and this is including demolition of the existing building, we're between 69 and 72 million. And then as we look at the renovations, or the additions at the elementary school, that's still consistent of that 13 to 15 million. So for that option, we're at 82 to 87.
So 2A, we are not building 5th grade into the new middle school.
That, yes, and that one, we're doing additions at all the elementaries.
Oh, we're gaining the space with the addition, okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
2B, again, that's the new early learning center option, so we're still looking at that 69 to 72 for a new middle school, another 25 to 27 for a new early learning center, and then the renovation is that 2 to 3 million within the school, so in that option, we're at 96 to 102. And then lastly, the 2C option, which is the new middle school, including 5th grade, and then the renovations to the existing elementary schools in those 5th grade classrooms, we're looking at 81 to 85 million.
That's what it never came from.
Yeah, right, like,
That's where it all
okay.
came from.
We do talk
I mean,
we do
2A
have
is
to plan
a,
things,
2A is 82 to 87.
I know where we can find that money.
Like, wiggle those around a little.
I had a question for you, Jenna,
Yeah.
about the C options, no wait. Adding a 5th grade to Central.
Yep.
Is 5th grade currently self-contained?
Yes,
And would they still be if they were at middle school?
yes.
Do they eat lunch with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders? I mean, logistically, I'm just thinking about,
Oh,
We
of
would
course.
need to think through scheduling, and obviously in this current model, they're sharing a cafeteria. So essentially, it's a shared space, but I would never recommend that 5th grade
That's what I
be
was
eating
wondering.
with
an 8th grader.
an 8th grade group.
Yeah.
Okay.
But in all of it, it's its own column, it's its own, like, classroom, 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 I think it's blue on most of them, and it's like,
That was in my mind,
Yeah.
like, are they roaming the halls with those 14-year-olds? You know, like-
that's a fair question.
I mean, when I went to school, it was 5th through 8th, but I just, they
We
seem
always-
so little now.
They benefit, you know, band is 5th grade through 8th
Okay,
grade,
yeah,
like
you're right,
that
you're
would
right.
be, I don't know if that would change, but like at least it'd be in the same building now. And I was talking to somebody whose child is a skipper. and like having it in, like, you know, having that be, now we don't have to travel, it would be in that building. The instruction could be there, so there's a few different groups that it would positively impact in that way as well.
And some of our elementary buildings currently also do some departmentalized structures, so for example, they might teach reading and social studies to a group of students, and then they alternate with their co-partner and they teach math and science.
okay.
So there is exposure at the fifth grade level
That's
and even
nice.
down at the fourth grade level in some of our elementary buildings to a departmentalized structure
Okay.
where they're experiencing multiple teachers.
Get some
Just-
shovels.
Just put it out there. I came from CPS where we stayed in the same school the whole entire period.
Yeah.
From
Pre-K to
kindergarten all the way up to eighth
Yeah.
grade, we
Yeah.
stayed in the same school, same building.
Yeah.
Right.
Sometimes it was seventh and eighth grade in the same classroom.
Mhm.
The teacher would teach seventh over here, and then they'll give eighth
Sure.
grade their instructions, yeah, so it
Yeah.
kind of working in.
Yes.
One thing I would add is that we didn't talk about, but as we're looking at the cafeteria and, you know, the cafeteria getting bigger in both the addition or in the new building, that does change the dynamic of how lunch works. The bigger it is, that means you can put more kids in, you may be able to go to fewer lunch periods,
Right.
or it allows you to bring in the other kids from the other building without
Yeah.
impacting your lunch periods.
Existing cafeteria is not a big space.
It's tight for the amount of students that we put in there for
Yeah.
our current
There's limits.
current
Or
number, so we have about 200 kids and, you know, a space that I would classify as a bit confined. And it definitely does not have, again, circulation to me is one of the bigger issues that I see, where if you have 200 kids in one space, you want them to have the ability to move freely if they're going up to get their lunch or whatnot, and not be tempted to touch their peers.
Imagine that.
Yeah.
Your hands
Was there the
yourself.
option to put those, like those long dividers in on the tracks like they have at
Oh,
Arrow?
I'm sure there's lots of
Right, where
options.
Arrows
that we
separate
can
their
explore.
gyms.
Yep.
you know.
Smart, yeah.
Yep. There's 3 currently at Central, one for each grade level.
3 lunch periods, is that the question?
The only other thing I would add on the budget end of things, you know, we're using budget numbers based on square footage costs that we're seeing for new schools that we're building currently. These are numbers coming from construction managers that are planning other elementary schools and middle schools that we're in design right now. They're certainly more than they were 4 years ago,
Oh, yeah.
unfortunately, but that's where the market is right now, so that's what we're looking at here.
Yeah, and I think that's a really valid point too, in that, you know, Eric and I were looking at rough figures about 4 years ago, and we were coming in for a new building around 50 million, and now we're at 85. And so I will just say that the cost of doing business now is not getting any less expensive. It is only getting more expensive. So the longer we do wait to take any sort of direct action with our facilities, it's going to just continue to go up in cost. And that is the reality, and you experience that too with our Aero building. We all know our Aero building, it's a state-of-the-art building. It was built, we're now in year 2, correct? Right, year 2 of Aero. And that was a project that, you know, was adopted and I think started the construction, and we were out the door at 50 million from start to finish. That building today, I guarantee you would cost close to 100,
Oh, sure.
so.
Yeah.
It's just what it's costing.
I do wanna say I thank you all for every option.
Yeah, it really, yes.
Every option does not have a mobile. Points for that. But Dr. Woodley, the pre-K center,
Yes,
wouldn't it really be beneficial? Because our enrollment every year, that's where the bulk of the enrollment comes from.
Mhm.
And then you have all the early learners in one location, one building. You know, the staff is feeding off each other, you know.
Mhm.
That's a really good idea.
It wouldn't be on there if I didn't think it wasn't.
I got you. That's a really good idea.
There was a grant opportunity that you and Eric prepared for, within the last couple of years. So they thought all the thoughts.
Uh-huh.
We didn't get the grant, but they thought all the thoughts and put that all together, assuming, like, imagining that that was gonna be the case. So you ran all those numbers and did all that work
Mhm.
preemptively, to kind of see if that was a possibility.
Yeah, and I do think that it is important to say that there is clearly a big push at the state level for full-day kindergarten, which we
Yes.
already have,
Yes.
which we're very fortunate that we already have, but also increasing early intervention options at the pre-K level. So ultimately, that would address the need for increased preschool classrooms, if we ever looked at tuition-based options, as well as combining all of our kindergarten facilities into one space.
It benefits just, I mean, in terms of like the number of kids that are coming in, like on track, ready to go, like.
Early
Kindergarten
intervention.
It's huge.
teachers would
It's
be
like-
ecstatic.
Yeah, you couldn't.
Yeah.
And we get one large graduation. Huge.
I mean, it's required now, right? Pre-K is required now, statewide?
No, full-day
Strongly
kindergarten
encouraged.
is
Okay.
required.
Okay, because they were saying like, I just remember that there was the, yes, we really want it, but we don't have the funding for it just yet, so.
And there are different, Tammy did not go into specific details about this today, but there are different bonding options for preschool K if you're expanding kindergarten that the state
Sure.
released. So if you're interested in looking at that further, we can expand on those options as well. So were you referring to David 1B specifically with the new early learning center?
Any of the B options, yeah.
Any of the B?
options.
No problem. Take it. Just thought it was a good idea.
Okay, awesome.
I have a question.
Yes,
Right now, the art and music changes by semester.
that is correct, yes.
We had a room for each, would that still happen, or would utilize for something else in the meantime?
It's a good question. I'd have to think about it a little bit more and really probably rely on my building principals. I'm looking at Scott, but I don't know if I know the answer quite yet. I mean, we can always look at staffing options too, if there would be a need to expand staffing.
Yeah, 'cause you'd need-
Like if we had
you'd
dedicated
need an
space.
additional, yeah.
Or I was just thinking as a technology teacher, you kind of
Ah.
roll around in a cart.
Yeah,
You know, if art takes place first semester, maybe first semester technology could be in the music, you know, if they could be like a,
a dedicated space for
Yeah.
that makes sense. Good point. Yeah.
planting a little seed there for technology. Nicely done.
Any other questions?
Probably a
you want-
million.
yeah, probably a million. Do you
Right,
want me to revisit why or how each option addresses space quickly, just so you make sure you fully understand, or do you think you understand how each option addresses space?
We shimmied pre-K and K or fifth
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, tried to relieve some pressure on our elementary schools in that way. Or we added on to the elementary schools.
Yep, you did very good.
Like,
Way less confusing than I thought it would be.
we can muddy the water. You wanna muddy the, we could, you know, hey. I mean, we all know, we have to get rid of the mobiles. We have to, like, and that requires removing 2 classrooms at least worth of students. So either doing it through pre-K and K or through 5th grade, like, or adding on to the building.
You know, and Ed, I'm sorry, you probably don't have this number, and Eric probably doesn't either, but I recall too, you gave me this big binder when we were looking, if we were to address every single building individually, on an individual need, it was probably close to $175 million. That's correct.
Off the top- Peter might have that off the top of his head.
And so I do want you to know, like, addressing facilities at the end of the day, it's costly. And obviously what we're trying to do is just plan for that appropriately, knowing that we can't address everything, but the bigger need is really how do we address the learning environment of our students based on the feedback that we had from our community,
Well,
our
that's- I feel like
teachers.
that's one of like the option twos, I mean, one of the nice things is that like the building's new, some of those, the plumbing, the like those are the things where it's like, okay, every so often we gotta redo this whole thing. You know, it's like with the option twos, it's like with the building's new, now like that, you
it's done for a
Every
while.
system that goes in there should last at least 30 years.
Yeah, exactly.
right?
Jim's
So-
not duct taping, you know.
Hope not.
Alright, great.
We're moving back to charts, spreadsheets.
Yes, we are.
Alright, wanted to end on the spreadsheet.
Thank you,
know.
thank you for that.
I'll let Peter talk to this, but again, this is really looking at sort of those 0 to 5 and 5 to 10, sort of high impact pieces that we could address now that wouldn't undo anything if you looked at any of these other options. We don't
Oh,
wanna
that
do,
was gonna be my first question.
we don't wanna do anything here and then you decide to do anything that we showed you today and you have to go and pull out brand new work. So these are things that you could do that would last, they're things that need to be done, and they won't impact that. You'll also notice that really we're focusing mainly on the elementary schools because the middle school is such there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah,
We don't
yeah,
wanna
it's a
start
decision
doing
to
things there and then you
Yeah.
decide you wanna do demolition or addition, so it's really focusing on those buildings, so with that, I'll let Peter talk through those.
Sure. So yes, we did focus on Central for the additions and the remodeling, but this kind of snapshot just goes over the other 4 schools. So starting with 0 to 5 years, we have Northeast School, that's up first, so exterior window and door replacement, roof replacement, and then replacing the domestic water piping and miscellaneous mechanical, electrical, plumbing work. Then we also added a new playground. That's TBD, that still has to be programmed out. So we don't know the full cost of that yet. We have to have further programming discussions with everyone before we can, put a placeholder in. But somewhere in the realm of Northeast being 1.3 million of work that could be tackled in the next, 0 to 5 years.
You'll notice a lot of these address sort of the thermal comfort, spatial comfort needs that was a big thing that we heard about. So addressing leaky, drafty windows, HVAC, that's really attacking that piece pretty much across the board.
And then all this, like the roof replacement, all that correlates to the facility assessment report that we put together, all of those maps, the color coding. This is just kind of a really rough snapshot. We didn't want to inundate you with too much information, but moving forward, there is a plan. There is designated areas when we say roof replacement. That's referring to us, and that dollar amount refers to this specific, color coded plan section that we have highlighted for the 0 to 5 years. So, Northwest, exterior door replacement, asbestos abatement and flooring replacement, and then replacing the gym air handling unit and other miscellaneous work. That's 823,000. Southeast, another door replacement, roof replacements, mechanical unit and miscellaneous MEP work, and then a new playground. So southeast is at 1.3 million. And then southwest, again, more windows and doors, trying to tackle all those first, roof replacements and mechanical units. And then the new playground, and that's at 1.7. So within the next 0 to 5 years, there's hypothetically $5.3 million worth of work that could be spent on those 4 schools. And that's just infrastructure work. That doesn't include anything that was discussed related to the additions or remodeling,
Right.
the central options. And then looking forward 5 to 10 years, going back to Northeast, a lot of these are going to be similar, replacing LED lighting, any life safety items. Those could be tackled at any time over the next 10 years.
A note on that, say life safety, I know that can be a trigger topic. There's nothing in those life safety items that we're saying needs to be addressed tomorrow that is a primary concern. They're things that should be looked at and addressed over the next 10 years, so you can tackle them early or later, but all the specifically concerning ones have been addressed prior to this.
And certainly as the plans develop, if certain options are taken, we can bundle projects together if it makes sense. If we're gonna be in an area for a particular school, we'll hit life safety items or other miscellaneous work to try and piecemeal these, or package these projects together rather. And then addressing the pickup and drop off. Again, that's TBD. We need to dig in and figure out what the options are for pickup and drop off. We know it needs to be fixed, but again, the additions could play a big role in what the fix for the drop off looks like. Northwest, paving replacements, LED replacements, and life safety items. Southeast, paving, LED, and life safety, and then southwest, paving, LED, boiler replacement, life safety, and pickup and drop off. So in the next, the 5 to 10 year period, there's like $3.5 million worth of work. Adding all that up over the next 10 years, with a 15% contingency, we're at a little over $10 million worth of infrastructure and life safety projects that could be completed. So.
Okay, so then let me speak to the project descriptions for the 0 to 5. So if you recall back to Tammy's presentation, this rough number of 5.3 is an estimated cost, which is why Eric and I are recommending the $6 million bond, so that we can start to address these top of the line, high priority items. So I'm just gonna review some that are really important, and transparently, like when we look at everything, we could still go back and say, I'm gonna give an example. Let's say we have on here Southwest, there's a new playground, but their preference is to really address their gym, okay? We can change these items, however, there's a couple in here that I would not recommend changing. So let me go through the ones I would not recommend changing. So the windows at Northeast absolutely have to be done.
Yeah.
There's an absolute need. They probably think all of them need to be done, but I'm just talking to you about the ones that I hear about regularly. I regularly hear about the windows at Northeast. At Northwest, the asbestos abatement and flooring replacement absolutely has to get done
We've known that for a bit.
for a very long time.
Yeah.
At Southeast, they need a new HVAC unit. It has to get done. And at Southwest, they need a new HVAC unit. It has to get done. So those are like the 4 big items that I'm saying we really need to act on. There's flexibility in probably some of the others, and then I'm gonna rely on Ed to say if I was mistaken by any of
I
those.
think you're absolutely correct.
Okay, great.
There's one thing that's not on here that we could add, and that is something we talked about at a previous meeting, is furniture. So that's another thing that could be layered into this, that could be a district-led initiative, that's something we could help with if you want to even do it, but that also gets some of that impact in the classrooms right away for you that you currently don't have.
So does that make sense as to why we were recommending the $6 million bond? Okay, great.
And I know that, I can't remember which memo it was, there's been a lot of them, but the part of what we're doing, part of our debt is ending. And so putting this in where the
Like
other one
stabilizing.
ends just keeps that even. Not that we have to keep it even, but it doesn't harm, it doesn't hurt. Like knowing that we can keep it even, so it's not a big jump or a big impact elsewhere. There's something kind of tidy about that to me, like,
Yes.
okay, that makes sense, and we're not adding it on. Where one ends, we just pick up with this, and we can do all of this for the good of our students. You asked for 0 to 5 or 5 to 10, right, David? Didn't we ask for that in a? Yes, we did,
yes, we
and
did.
here it is, so, yeah.
So quick question, the 85 million referendum bond, that's a request at 2026 potentially, right?
Correct.
Okay, so if we did
You
make
could
that
look at,
request,
you could look at any election year that
Mhm.
you choose as a board, however, I would not recommend it any earlier than that.
gotcha. But, so the 0 to 5 projects, let's say they're up and running,
Mhm.
that wouldn't have a problem with us starting with the $85 million project in 2026, they could run at the same time?
They can run at the same
Okay.
time.
They need to happen anyway,
Okay, wanna make
I
sure.
think, right?
That we're not waiting
I don't
to
wanna
start.
sum up, but like,
Correct.
The one caveat I would add to that,
Okay.
if you were to go that route, if, say, that route implies a new middle school,
Yes,
right? So to design a brand new school, we're talking upwards of a year potentially to do it right, to do all the programming, to do all that stuff. Generally, if you're going out for a referendum, you don't start a lot of that till after it's passed.
okay,
To Tammy's point earlier, there's a lot of that front end work to, if you're to pay us to design this thing all the way ready to go to bid and then it doesn't pass, you've made a large investment that you're not gonna see a return on, so we would
Makes
wait.
sense.
So if you did do that and passed in 26, you're probably not putting a shovel in the ground for at least a year.
and the 0 to 5 projects are all not at Central.
okay.
Does that answer your question?
Okay.
Yeah, you're counting. What grade is she in?
Yeah, no, that's fair.
That's a good thing.
I was thinking of the little one back there. I was like, okay, like how does that impact? You know, how does that like, where would she fall in that? Like, okay, so 3 to 4 years and yeah.
So how long does it take to build a new building nowadays?
That's a good question.
It is a good question.
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Look, if everything went the way it's supposed to go,
Yeah, right? Well,
you know.
contingency,
Right.
that's
all the
always
supplies,
I've seen TV
everything
shows
was
where you
in,
get it
people
done in
showed
22
up.
minutes.
Fast forward on the camera and it's up. I think a good place to sit is around 18 months.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair place to be. It may go faster, there's ways you can try and fast track.
Sure.
There's ways that, you know, if you are moving forward, you can let packages while design's happening, so we could have the building shell pretty much designed and the footings are starting while we're finishing out interiors, so you can condense that overall schedule. But 18 months, I think, is a good place to live at right now until we get further.
With that question,
Very well.
so how long for, so the 18 months, I'm like, okay, so that's 1 full school year, we don't feed students. But that's the, no, that's the building the new versus the tearing down the demoing the existing. So that would really fully impact at least 1 full school year.
Generally, when we see that lunch disruption,
It's 1 full school year at
it
least.
works out to 1 full school year, or it's a half a semester on one side and a half on the other.
Mhm.
So we would start,
Oh, and then we do it in the summer and
we'd
then-
start in the
I got
spring
you.
when the ground thaws,
Yes.
while you're at school doing the beginning work, so you're
Sure.
already moved over. You work through the summer and then into the first semester, and by Christmas, hopefully, you're back into the
I
new
got you.
space.
So a little less than the 18-month window for building fully new, but still, it does impact, the school year. And that's just the easy and obvious, like, there will be impacts, of course there will be impacts, so that's just, like I said. Okay,
Great. Any other questions for Ed, Peter, Heather? You've been very busy for us.
It's been fun.
you're nice.
Yeah, they are nice.
Fun, okay, we'll take it, you know, you wanna call it fun? I think
It
it's
is
fun.
nice to see when we hear the stuff that the community's asking for and being able to figure out ways to implement that in your facilities, that is fun for us, so.
Heather, I really liked seeing it all kind of like fitted together on the fact that you had that portion of the presentation this evening, like seeing it all actually come to life was
I'm
pretty
glad
cool.
it made sense.
So are we, so thank you, yeah, no, it was good.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do you have more questions?
Do you have more questions? Exciting.
Thank you.
It's exciting,
I already
yes.
made my decision, so.
What was yours?
What's the timeline for the,
For the what?
For HVAC, if we say a go-ahead on,
Yeah.
So
Like-
it is always our
good
hope,
question.
that is a good question. So it is always our hope that we would have the supplies necessary to then go out to bid, which is why we're recommending that resolution with Tammy. So
And
that we
next
could go out to bid
Yeah.
for HVAC sooner than you actually get the funding, but then pay it back.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Now, I cannot promise, in today's world, it is always our intent that we would be able to do that this summer. But there's that ComEd piece that I'm not gonna explain well, that Eric or Jim would help me
That was
explain.
the 54-week lag, right?
Lag.
Wasn't that the ordering or something like that?
Yes, that we can just not predict, and it's really a supply and demand issue. But it would be our hope that we can do as much pre-work this summer to then hopefully get it installed the following summer at the very latest.
But we still have to get the ball rolling now to
Correct.
make all of that happen.
Yep.
Even likely.
And let me tell ya, have you been to Northeast?
Is it pretty awesome?
It is so great. Like you feel a difference, right, Jim? It is great.
So nice.
Yes. You feel a difference, so we really
So we're
definitely
looking
paid off.
forward, looking at 2025 school year for the,
Yeah, it would be our hope to get something,
Summer?
yes, this summer.
2024, wait,
So
Yeah,
25,
you're right, okay,
starting
25,
25 summer.
26.
or
Correct.
26,
No
okay.
matter what, we would start this summer. It's a matter of whether or not it would be
If you
completed.
get parts.
Yes.
So really, all of these, I'm looking at the list that's suggested in the 0 to 5. If we were to, if we're gonna go ahead with the funding, we still wouldn't be taking out windows anytime soon.
Correct.
Or doors, it would just be setting that up, getting the bids and things like that to make that happen. Most likely next summer would be a very busy summer,
Exactly.
which is
It's
exciting.
always good, right?
It is, it's so
Right.
exciting, yeah, definitely.
Upgrades.
Jim's twitching back there, sorry. We think it's
He's ready.
exciting. I bet, I bet you are, yeah, no, that's pretty awesome, so. Hey, he's got stuff.
New buildings
Yeah,
looking
oh,
like
that would be
fall.
nice, right? What was your question, I'm sorry?
We could potentially have a new building in fall of 28.
So how old's your
Millie will be a fifth grader.
daughter?
Any route,
Hmm.
good news. Yep,
That's
the world is our oyster.
My
That's what I like
youngest.
to say.
was the first sixth grade class.
Oh, cool.
So my older two are like, Central what? Cause they were the junior high and John's like middle school. But he was the first sixth grade class there, so that's the math I do in my head too, so I get it. It's exciting.
Nice, I'm
It's a
glad.
lot to,
I
David
feel
is
like
doing
Eric
math.
and and Jim, we've been working on this for 3 years. So I feel like this is our summary.
You're doing math up in the
project.
clouds here,
No, I
aren't
was
you?
thinking, 'cause if you,
Yeah, yeah, you
if you
are.
move early learning to one location, it's gonna alleviate some of the parking problems at the other individual schools also. So you don't have to worry so much about parking there.
Relieves pressure and
Right.
redistributes
Yeah.
and.
Definitely lots of options, so. And like I said, I did not, they had asked, do you want us to remove any options? I said, no, I want the board to see every option, so you can know what exists and why, and
Yeah, definitely. We need to make sure to get copies of all of this for Rachel and Michael. Yes. They definitely need to check it all out too.
And if they have any questions, call you,
Don't come
Colleen.
close, cause he's sick,
Yes, I'm just
so just
kidding.
leave it in the mailbox.
Call Jen.
You can leave us.
no, and we did stream tonight's meeting, so they can always tune in and watch.
Oh, that's true, they can watch it that way, that's
Thank
true.
you, Dan, for staying.
Nice. Okay. I'm getting there. Are we good? No more questions? Okay, well, I mean, our architects and our,
Yeah,
But I
there's
know, there's a
STEM in
million
here,
more.
There's the early learning, there's the
There's-
getting rid of the mobile, there's
checks all your boxes,
new
right?
places, you know,
Okay.
Exciting.
it's exciting.
It is, and it's a lot to think about, so. Okay, so, shall we? Yes, okay. And Denise asked, hopefully it would be not too long, like we wouldn't be here too late, so I hope this fits into the not too late. So that being said, if there is no other, conversation for the good of the board. All right, so, I move that we adjourn. May I have a first motion to adjourn?
Motion adjourned.
Thank you, and a second?
Second,
Okay, and a roll call, we'll do it official.
Dr. Michael Thomas.
Yes.
Denise Jones, yes. David Shepherd,
Yes.
Lauren Dowden,
Yes.
Colleen Timzak.
Yes,
Meeting adjourned
Meeting adjourned.
at 7:14 p.m.
excellent, great, thank you so much.